Hi guys, what we have right here is a lens that I am completely in love with because it fulfills all of the things that I like on this channel. I like finding really high quality things at affordable prices and then presenting them to you fine folks. And this lens punches so far above its price point. This can be had for under $130 US, and it's an f1.8, so you can get that shallow depth of field, that blurry background, and it also autofocuses fantastically. It is not a perfect lens, but it is more than appropriate for $130, an excellent value. I just recently went on a vacation to the island of Newfoundland. That is where I'm from, if you can't tell from my leprechaun voice, and I only took this lens right here and a little aps-c camera, the A6700. I wanted to travel light. I was going with my family and it fit the bill so perfectly, and I absolutely love the photos that I got on the entire trip. It was really just to test this lens out, the trip was, but I really didn't expect the lens to perform so well. You see, this lens is a 50mm, and on an aps-c camera, you get roughly the equivalent of a 75mm field of view with a full frame camera. And I think that is great for when you're traveling with your family because you like to get nice portraits of your kids and your wife and your friends if you have any. I don't have a lot of those, but you get that nice soft blurry background, and we'll talk about the quality of the bokeh coming out of this lens in a little bit, but you get that nice soft background and that good separation. So it looks really great for your family photos, for your memories, and also when you have landscapes that are far away, like in Newfoundland. The mountains are across the ocean there. Well, not fully across the ocean, but you're on little inlets and there's mountains over there. You can't quite, people zoom with your feet. You can't zoom with your feet unless you're the Lord. You can't walk over the water, or so I'm told. You have that 75mm full frame field of view, so you can bring those objects a bit closer to you. I really like having this focal length because I don't have to stand so close to the action to get the action in my photos. This focal length can also be great for things like product photography, or if you're taking pictures of your food and you're putting those up on Instagram or Yelp to write some kind of scathing review, then right here, this lens will do you just fine. Now, this 50mm f1.8 is from the Yongnuo company, and that is a company that is impressing me more and more with every lens that I test. I am always pleasantly surprised at how great the optical quality is on the Yongnuo lenses when you consider their price points. And this lens right here is the version 2 of the 50mm f1.8 for Sony E-mount. Now, they do have the version 1, which is highly regarded and very well reviewed, and they have that for the Sony E, the Nikon Z, and also the Fuji X mount. But this one here is a newer release. It is the updated version, and what you get is a slightly better autofocusing motor in this guy right here and low dispersion glass elements to help you out with your image quality. Now, I will list down below the proper version for Sony, the version 2, in case you are interested in checking this lens out further, and I will also link the Nikon and the Fuji, but those will be the version 1. Hopefully, they will announce a version 2 for those two mounts as well. So now when we talk about the build quality, this is where you can definitely see that Yongnuo is saving some costs here on these materials. This is not an expensive feeling lens. It is all plastic, but it is very light, and it just has a focus ring that turns, just okay, and it makes a bit of a sound as you turn. Nothing special, not a deal breaker at all, but certainly not a premium feeling lens. It has no buttons, switches, or dials. It does have a USB-C port that is there for updating the lens, but that is it. No weather sealing really to speak of. On this new version 2, they say they use better coatings to help with dust and moisture resistance, but I would not take this lens out in the elements at all. The lens hood is made of light, cheap-feeling plastic and sits atop there, a little bulbous, sort of like an oversized hat. But I must say, I really enjoyed the feel and the look of the lens on my A6700. If you have a smaller aps-c camera, this will balance very well, and it is a real joy to take around. But of course, the most important thing when it comes to a lens is, does it function properly and are the images good? And I can say that in both those categories, this lens excels. The image quality, I think, is excellent, especially for a $130 lens. The colors, they just pop. I found no real difference between this lens and my more expensive Sony lenses when I took those photos into Lightroom. I was really impressed with the sharpness of this lens. It is quite sharp in the center and it is okay in the corners. It gets a little soft in the corners, but as you stop it down to f2.8 and especially f4, you see those corners sharpen up, and then it is sharp from corner to corner. So a lot of my landscape photos I was taking at f8 or so I was getting sharpness straight across the entire image. Now, an area that lower price lenses can often fall apart is when it comes to autofocus reliability. Sometimes the autofocus can be sketchy, especially on a lens priced like this. I'm happy to say that is not the case with the Yongnuo 50 1.8. It latches on very quickly without any hesitation. You can also track subjects very well, very snappy, responsive autofocus. Now, the part of the autofocus that wouldn't be as good as something like the Sony 55mm, that first-party lens, is when it comes to objects moving as you are tracking. If somebody is moving towards you quickly and you are tracking and taking photos, you are going to get less of a hit rate than you would on a native Sony lens. So I found that if a subject is moving quickly towards me and I just had it locked on and I was holding down the button there, I would get about a 50% hit rate, which is what I would expect from a non-first party lens that is much cheaper than a native Sony lens. So I would say this lens is not for you if you are trying to shoot sports where you are tracking a player, let's say, who's moving very, very quickly. However, if you are just shooting casual photography, the person is not running towards you, the focus will be absolutely fantastic on this lens. And I had no trouble, no missed shots when I was walking around taking my regular photography. Another important aspect for your videography and your photography, especially when you're down at f1.8, is the quality of the bokeh. And I really like the bokeh on this lens. The autofocus backgrounds look very smooth, not distracting, even if it's busy back there. Nice fall off from things that are in focus to out of focus. I just love the way the photos look, even down at f1.8 for this lens. When you look at the bokeh balls, you have nice, clean, round balls. It is always hard to say this part with a straight face, but I definitely love the way the bokeh balls come out of this lens. You will see a tiny bit of green fringing around the outside of the bokeh balls if you are pixel peeping, but it is not very noticeable, and it doesn't show up in my day-to-day photography with this guy. Now, speaking of pixel peeping, you will see some chromatic aberration and longitudinal chromatic aberration in high contrast scenes when you are looking for it. Now, chromatic aberration is fairly easy to correct in post, so to me that is not much of an issue. If you do have, a dark subject against a bright background, then you will probably see some of that different magenta green color fringing there on the edges of your lines. But the longitudinal chromatic aberration, that is harder to correct in post, and you are going to certainly see that in spades when you are down at f1.8. But both the chromatic aberration and longitudinal chromatic aberration is very, very reduced at f2.8, and at f4 it's almost completely gone. So depending on what you are shooting, the chromatic aberration and LOCA, it just may not be an issue for you at all. However, it is present in this lens as expected. The lens does exhibit a moderate amount of focus breathing, so if you are trying to stack your photos in post, you're doing some focus stacking, then you are going to have to contend with some focus breathing, as well as if you are shooting video and you're doing long focus pulls, big dramatic focus pulls, you are going to see your scene shift in and out just a little bit. So that is something to be aware of. Now, the flare and ghosting was a surprise to me on this lens. I really thought it would be terrible. You see a little bit of flares, but nothing crazy, and not much ghosting at all. It really retains a lot of contrast, so that is very impressive on a $130 lens. Now, let's say you have an aps-c camera and you are just using the kit lens right now. I think this is an excellent first lens to buy. It finally gets you into that f1.8. You get that nice blurry background, you get a reliably autofocusing lens. The image quality is quite good on it. Its build quality is not great. You have a little bit of chromatic aberration, some LOCA, and some focus breathing, but for $130, you can get pictures that are really equivalent to a much more expensive lens. And once again, I'd like to thank Yongnuo for sending this out for review for you guys. And I also want to thank them for continuing to make high quality lenses at affordable prices. Let's see what they do next. Anyway, thanks for watching this. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.